Starkiller, forged as a secret weapon of Darth Vader, was unlike any other Force wielder in the galaxy. Born from manipulation and trained to embody the raw destructive potential of the Sith, his path was one of relentless challenge and evolution. On the Death Star, at the height of his power, Starkiller did the unthinkable. He defeated both Vader and Emperor Palpatine in combat. Yet he stopped short of killing them, retreating with the Rebel Alliance instead of striking the final blow. This pivotal decision would reverberate across the galaxy, reshaping the trajectory of the Galactic Civil War, the Empire, and the very nature of the Force. Starkiller's decision to spare Vader and Sidious was not born of mercy, but of calculated resolve. As he battled them, he saw the fragility behind their overwhelming power, the crumbling foundation of a regime sustained by fear and oppression. Killing them, Starkiller reasoned, would elevate him into their place, perpetuating the cycle of Sith domination. Instead, he chose to undermine the Empire from within, leaving its leadership exposed and humiliated. By defeating them without delivering the killing blow, Starkiller disrupted their iron grip on the galaxy while avoiding the allure of absolute power himself. As Starkiller retreated with the rebels, the Alliance was stunned by the turn of events. For years, the Emperor and Vader had been untouchable figures of terror. To see them defeated, even if not slain, was an act of defiance that reverberated across the galaxy. Starkiller's presence among the rebels was both an inspiration and a point of contention. His immense power and Sith origins made him a symbol of hope to some and a dangerous liability to others. Nevertheless, his triumph against the Empire's strongest figures sparked a surge of morale for the Alliance, galvanizing their cause. For Starkiller, the aftermath of his decision was anything but simple. His relationship with the Force, shaped by the teachings of Vader and the brutalities of the dark side, left him in a state of inner turmoil. The Jedi teachings he had glimpsed through his interactions with Ram Koda offered a glimmer of a different path, but Starkiller was not one to blindly follow dogma. His refusal to kill Vader and Sidious was as much a rejection of Sith philosophy as it was of the Jedi's rigid morality. Starkiller began to chart his own course, neither Sith nor Jedi, but something in between, a being who sought to balance power with purpose. Meanwhile, the Empire was shaken but not broken. Palpatine and Vader survived their defeat, but their aura of invincibility was shattered. Palpatine, ever the manipulator, retreated to Coruscant to consolidate power, spinning the narrative to frame Starkiller's victory as a mere fluke, the result of treachery rather than true strength. Vader, wounded both physically and in his pride, became obsessed with vengeance, channeling his humiliation into a ruthless pursuit of Starkiller and the rebels. Their survival ensured that the Sith remained a looming threat, but their defeat planted seeds of doubt within the ranks of the Empire. Officers, stormtroopers, and regional governors began to question the leadership of their once unstoppable masters. For the rebels, Starkiller's presence introduced new dynamics into their fight against the Empire. His unmatched abilities in the Force made him a valuable asset, but his volatile temperament and Sith training cast a long shadow. Mon Mothma and Bail Organa were cautious, understanding the risks of aligning with someone so steeped in darkness. Yet others like Ram Koda, who had seen Starkiller's potential firsthand, argued that his power could be a decisive advantage. Starkiller himself remained an enigma to the Alliance. He fought alongside them, but his motivations were deeply personal, driven by a desire to destroy the system that had created and enslaved him. As the war progressed, Starkiller's influence began to grow. On the battlefield, he was a force of nature, turning the tide of crucial engagements through sheer power and tactical brilliance. His mastery of the Force allowed him to perform feats that bordered on the mythical, bringing down Imperial walkers with a single gesture, shielding entire squadrons from enemy fire, and dismantling the Empire's strongest fortifications with precision strikes. These victories solidified his reputation as a living legend among the rebel ranks, but they also drew the ire of Palpatine and Vader, who saw in him the greatest threat to their rule. Starkiller's journey was not without its challenges. His decision to spare Vader and Sidious weighed heavily on him. He questioned whether his refusal to kill them had been a moment of weakness, an inability to fully sever his connection to his past. Yet, as he reflected on the consequences of his actions, he began to see the cracks forming within the Empire. The seeds of rebellion were spreading, and Starkiller believed that the people of the galaxy needed to rise against tyranny themselves. rather than rely on a single individual to slay their oppressors. He became an advocate for resistance, inspiring others to stand against the Empire while grappling with his own complex relationship to power. Vader's obsession with Starkiller grew to a fever pitch. For the Dark Lord, his defeat was not just a failure but a betrayal of everything he had worked to achieve. He had created Starkiller to be the ultimate weapon, and now that weapon had turned against him. Vader began a relentless pursuit, dispatching his Inquisitors and the full might of the Empire to track Starkiller down. Palpatine, on the other hand, was more calculated in his approach. The Emperor sought to exploit Starkiller's inner conflict, attempting to lure him back to the dark side with promises of power and purpose. The galaxy itself began to shift in response to Starkiller's actions. Coruscant became a fortress world, the heart of a wounded empire desperately trying to maintain control. Regional governors and imperial warlords began to vie for power, sensing weakness in the Sith leadership. Starkiller's presence emboldened other factions, from criminal syndicates to independent systems, to challenge the Empire's authority. Yet, this fragmentation also created new dangers, as the galaxy descended into a chaotic struggle for dominance. Amidst this upheaval, Starkiller's exploration of the Force took him to ancient sites of power, Jedi temples, Sith tombs, and hidden nexuses of energy. He sought to understand the Force beyond the narrow teachings of the Sith and Jedi, uncovering secrets that had been lost for millennia. These journeys deepened his connection to the Force, but also brought him into contact with visions of the past and future. He saw glimpses of a galaxy where balance was possible, but it required sacrifices that tested his resolve. Starkiller's decision to spare Vader and Sidious, even after defeating them, marked a moment of profound transformation in the galaxy. For Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord who thrived on dominance and manipulation, this moment changed everything. For the first time in his long reign, Emperor Palpatine experienced something unfamiliar: caution. The defeat at Starkiller's hands shattered the illusion of the Sith's invincibility, forcing the Emperor to reassess his strategies and the very nature of his ambitions. No longer could he view himself as untouchable, nor Vader as the sole enforcer of his will. Starkiller had become a force that even the Dark Lord of the Sith could no longer ignore. Sidious recognized that Starkiller was unlike anyone he had encountered before. The apprentice's ability to channel the Force so effortlessly, melding the raw power of the dark side with the discipline and purpose he had glimpsed from the light, made him a figure of unparalleled potential. He had bested not only Vader, Palpatine's most trusted servant, but Palpatine himself, without succumbing fully to the seductive promises of power. That refusal intrigued the Emperor in ways he would not admit. Starkiller had not sought to claim the Sith throne or destroy the Sith ideology outright. Instead, he had walked away, retreating with the Rebel Alliance, leaving Palpatine alive but shaken. This unorthodox defiance planted a seed of respect, grudging as it was, in the Emperor's mind. For Palpatine, Starkiller's strength and independence presented a paradox. On one hand, Starkiller was a threat that could not be ignored, a rival whose power and defiance could inspire rebellion across the galaxy. On the other, Starkiller represented an unparalleled opportunity, a successor worthy of the Sith's dark legacy, someone capable of carrying the Sith's ambitions into the future. This was a possibility Palpatine had never seriously entertained before. His disdain for Vader's failures, limitations, and lingering attachment to the past had always made the prospect of replacing him a tantalizing but distant option. Starkiller, however, changed everything. For the first time, Palpatine saw the potential for a true successor, one who could even surpass him in time. This newfound respect for Starkiller, however, did not diminish Palpatine's manipulative tendencies. If anything, it reinforced them. He would bide his time, carefully observing Starkiller's movements and waiting for the right moment to strike, whether to eliminate him as a rival or draw him into the Sith fold. In the interim, Palpatine adopted a more defensive posture, fortifying key strongholds like Coruscant and assigning Vader to pursue Starkiller with renewed determination. Yet, even as he issued these orders, a part of him doubted Vader's ability to finish the task. Palpatine's once unshakable confidence in his apprentice was eroding, replaced by a cautious, calculating awareness that Starkiller had exposed the flaws in his carefully constructed empire. Starkiller, meanwhile, had no illusions about the danger he faced. He knew that sparing Vader and Sidious had not bought him any peace, it had merely postponed their retaliation. but he also understood that the galaxy was watching. By defeating them without killing them, he had created an opening, a fracture in the Empire's armor that the Rebel Alliance could exploit. Starkiller's actions were as much a psychological blow as they were a tactical one, showing that the Sith could be fought and beaten. This newfound sense of possibility galvanized the rebels, who began to view Starkiller not merely as a defector or ally, but as a leader. Despite his conflicted relationship with the Alliance, Starkiller found himself drawn into their cause. His intimate knowledge of the Empire's inner workings, combined with his unparalleled combat abilities, made him a vital asset. He began to lead critical strikes against key Imperial installations, targeting shipyards, weapons facilities, and communication hubs with surgical precision. These missions were unlike anything the rebels had attempted before. With Starkiller at the forefront, they operated with an audacity and effectiveness that left the Empire reeling. Starkiller's tactical brilliance and sheer power turned the tide in battles that might otherwise have been lost, allowing the rebels to score victories that were as symbolic as they were strategic. Each victory further destabilized the Empire, emboldening resistance movements across the galaxy. Systems that had once been too fearful to act began to rise up, inspired by Starkiller's defiance and the vulnerability he had exposed in the Empire's leadership. Yet, Starkiller's growing prominence did not come without challenges. His approach, while effective, was not universally embraced within the Alliance. Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and other leaders worried about the moral implications of relying so heavily on someone so steeped in the dark side. Starkiller's brutal efficiency on the battlefield often clashed with the Alliance's ideals, creating tensions that threatened to fracture their fragile unity. Starkiller himself was acutely aware of this tension. He did not see himself as a savior or a symbol, but rather as a weapon one aimed at the heart of the Empire. His decision to work with the rebels was not born of ideological alignment, but of necessity. The Alliance offered him the means to dismantle the system that had created and enslaved him, but Starkiller knew that his own path would ultimately diverge from theirs. He was not interested in restoring the Jedi Order or establishing a new republic. His vision for the galaxy was one of balance, a rejection of the binary struggle between light and dark that had defined the Sith and Jedi for millennia. As Starkiller led the rebels in increasingly daring operations, Palpatine's obsession with him grew. The Emperor began to see Starkiller not merely as a threat to be eliminated, but as a challenge, a test of his own philosophy and power. He started to orchestrate elaborate schemes to lure Starkiller back to the dark side, using everything from false promises of peace to visions of his own potential as a ruler. Palpatine's attempts to manipulate Starkiller were subtle and insidious, playing on the apprentice's doubts and inner turmoil. Yet Starkiller's defiance remained steadfast. He had tasted the emptiness of the dark side's promises and the limitations of the Jedi's rigid ideals. His resolve to carve his own path only deepened. The galaxy, caught in the midst of this unfolding conflict, began to change in ways neither the Empire nor the rebels had anticipated. Starkiller's actions created a ripple effect, destabilizing the Empire, but also drawing attention to the inherent flaws in the Rebel Alliance's structure and strategy. The growing legend of Starkiller inspired not only hope but fear, as both factions grappled with the implications of his power. For the first time, the fate of the galaxy seemed to hinge not on the dominance of the Empire or the triumph of the rebellion, but on the choices of a single individual who defied easy categorization. Palpatine, ever the schemer, began to view Starkiller's independent philosophy as a potential threat to the Sith's very existence. If Starkiller could balance the light and dark, embracing the Force in its totality without succumbing to either extreme, it would render the Sith's power dynamic obsolete. Yet the Emperor also saw in Starkiller the possibility of evolution, a successor who could transcend the limitations of the Sith while preserving their core principles. This duality, threat and opportunity, made Starkiller the most significant figure in Palpatine's calculations. As Starkiller continued to lead critical strikes with the rebels, he began to see glimpses of the larger role he was playing in the galaxy's destiny. Each mission, each victory, brought him closer to the heart of the Empire, to the final confrontation he knew was inevitable. Starkiller's path was one of transformation, not just for himself, but for the galaxy at large. By sparing Vader and Sidious, he had set in motion a chain of events that would redefine the struggle between light and dark, freedom and tyranny. For Palpatine, Starkiller was no longer merely a rival or a successor. He was the embodiment of everything the Emperor both feared and desired, a being of unparalleled power and untapped potential, whose ultimate fate would determine the future of the galaxy.